It's easy to focus on one name, one breakthrough, one headline, one story that feels big enough to explain everything. But what if that story is only the surface? Because while the world debates Maxwell, something quieter and far more important is happening across the continent. In workshops, classrooms, garages, and backyards, a new generation of African inventors is solving problems the rest of the world hasn't even agreed are worth solving yet. And they're not waiting for permission. The first mind doesn't start with global ambition. It starts with a local frustration. Power that's unreliable. Infrastructure that's missing. Systems that don't scale down to everyday realities. Instead of copying solutions designed elsewhere, this inventor flips the question entirely. What works here? The result isn't flashy, but it's resilient. Built to survive heat, dust, and inconsistency. Designed for people who can't afford failure. It's technology shaped by necessity, not convenience. Then there's another inventor working in a completely different space, but driven by the same instinct. Where others see waste, he sees raw material. Discarded electronics become components. Broken machines become lessons. This isn't recycling for optics, it's engineering born from constraint. Every prototype tells a story of trial and error, of learning without mentors, of progress without applause. A third innovator takes aim at communication itself. In regions where connectivity is fragile or expensive, this mind asks a dangerous question. What if access wasn't dependent on existing networks at all? The idea sounds unrealistic until early tests begin to work. Quietly, imperfectly, but enough to prove the concept isn't fantasy. That's the pattern. None of these inventors claim miracles. They claim process. Long nights, failed builds, incremental wins. And that honesty is exactly why their work matters. Another innovator approaches health, not with billion-dollar equipment, but with simplification. Strip systems down, reduce cost, increase reach. The goal isn't to replace global medicine, but to make survival less dependent on geography. The early results don't trend on social media, but they change outcomes in places statistics rarely capture. And finally, there's one more inventor who understands something crucial. Technology doesn't exist in isolation. If people can't maintain it, it fails. So, the innovation isn't just the device, it's the method. Training baked into design. Repairability treated as a feature, not an afterthought. Across all 5 stories, a common thread emerges. These aren't inventors trying to impress the world. They're inventors trying to make life work. And that's why they're dangerous to the status quo. Because their success doesn't rely on massive funding, global supply chains, or centralized control. It relies on understanding reality as it is, not as it's marketed. Maxwell may have opened the door, but he's far from alone. What's unfolding now isn't a single breakthrough, it's a shift. A realization that innovation has never belonged to one place, one culture, or one system. And once that realization takes hold, it changes how you see everything that follows. Because when you stop looking for innovation only in polished labs and glossy product launches, you start noticing it in quieter places. In solutions that don't seek attention, but quietly outperform expectations. In designs that look simple on the surface, yet carry deep intelligence underneath. These inventors aren't racing to dominate markets. They're racing to close gaps. Gaps in access. Gaps in reliability. Gaps between what people need and what existing systems provide. That difference matters. It means their work evolves differently. Instead of chasing upgrades every year, they chase durability. Instead of optimizing for luxury, they optimize for survival. And instead of designing for ideal conditions, they design for the worst ones, because that's what reality demands. What's most striking is how interconnected these efforts are, even when the inventors themselves have never met. A breakthrough in energy influences transportation. A breakthrough in communication reshapes education. A breakthrough in health unlocks productivity. Each solution strengthens the next, creating an ecosystem rather than isolated wins. And this is where the global tech narrative starts to feel incomplete. Because while billions are spent perfecting convenience elsewhere, these inventors are redefining value. They're asking whether technology should exist to impress, or to endure, to extract, or to empower. The world's reaction, predictably, is mixed. Some celebrate the stories. Some attempt to reframe them. Some rush to label them as emerging or experimental, hoping that language will keep them safely categorized. But labels don't stop progress. Because the real impact isn't measured in headlines, it's measured in adoption. In the quiet moment when a tool works where nothing worked before. In the subtle shift when people stop waiting for solutions and start expecting them from within their own communities. That expectation is powerful. It changes how young minds see their future. It turns consumers into builders, observers into participants. And once that happens, innovation stops being rare. It becomes cultural. Because culture doesn't need permission to spread. Once innovation becomes something people feel they're allowed to attempt, the pace accelerates naturally. Children begin to tinker without being told it's unrealistic. Students stop memorizing answers and start questioning assumptions. Failure loses its stigma and becomes part of the process. That shift is subtle, but profound. It means the next generation of inventors won't see these 5 as exceptions. They'll see them as proof of concept. Evidence that world-class ideas can emerge from familiar streets, from modest tools, from environments once labeled as behind. And that reframing has consequences. It challenges where investment flows. It challenges who gets taken seriously. It challenges the idea that innovation must be imported. Because when solutions are built close to the problems they solve, they evolve faster and last longer. They don't break the moment conditions change. They adapt because adaptation was part of their origin. What makes these 5 inventors especially significant isn't just what they've built. It's how they think. They don't start with what's trending. They start with what's missing. They don't ask, will this scale globally? They ask, will this work tomorrow? And by answering those questions honestly, they end up creating technology with global relevance, almost by accident. That's the irony. The more grounded their thinking, the broader their impact becomes. And this is why focusing on just one name misses the point. Because what we're witnessing isn't a lone genius moment. It's a pattern emerging across the continent. Different fields, different approaches, same underlying mindset. A mindset shaped by necessity, resilience, and refusal to wait. The world may still frame these stories as surprises, as anomalies, as exceptions to the rule. But patterns don't lie. And growth, once it reaches a certain point, becomes impossible to ignore. At first, it looks scattered. A prototype here, a pilot project there, a local solution solving a local problem. Easy to dismiss when viewed in isolation. Easy to underestimate when measured by the wrong standards. But then connections begin to form. Inventors start learning from each other indirectly. Not through formal networks, but through shared constraints, shared obstacles, shared victories. An energy solution inspires a transportation idea. A communication breakthrough informs a health innovation. Progress compounds quietly. And suddenly the narrative shifts, because the question is no longer, can this work? It becomes, why didn't this exist sooner? That's the moment when the outside world pays closer attention. Not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. Because solutions built for resilience tend to outperform in unstable times. And the world, increasingly, is unstable. Supply chains fracture. Energy costs fluctuate. Infrastructure strains. Systems optimized for comfort struggle under pressure. Meanwhile, technologies forged under constraint keep functioning. That contrast is impossible to ignore. And it forces a deeper realization. Innovation born from scarcity isn't inferior. It's often superior. It's leaner, more adaptable, less fragile, built to survive conditions others were never tested against. This is where the story stops being inspirational and starts being strategic. Because now, these 5 inventors aren't just changing perceptions, they're influencing outcomes. Governments take note. Industries observe quietly. Educational models begin to question their assumptions. Not because of hype. Because of results. And results have a way of rewriting the rules. What's emerging isn't a moment. It's momentum. A slow, steady shift toward a more distributed future of innovation, one where ideas don't need to travel thousands of miles to be validated. They just need to work. And once working becomes the standard, credibility follows naturally. Not the kind built on marketing or prestige, but the kind earned through repetition, day after day, under real conditions, with real users. Each successful deployment adds weight to the idea that innovation doesn't have to look familiar to be effective. This is where the conversation gets uncomfortable for established systems. Because if reliable solutions can be built without massive capital, without elite institutions, and without centralized control, then the barriers that once defined who gets to innovate start to look less like safeguards and more like gatekeeping. That realization doesn't trigger applause. It triggers resistance. Skepticism sharpens. Standards shift. Questions multiply. Some are fair. Some are strategic. But even scrutiny serves a purpose. It forces refinement. It pushes these inventors to document better, test harder, and communicate more clearly. And they adapt. Because adaptation is what they've always done. What's often overlooked is how these inventors redefine success. They don't measure it by valuation or virality. They measure it by adoption, by repairability, by whether someone with limited resources can actually use the technology and keep it running. That mindset quietly undermines the idea that progress must be centralized. Instead, it suggests a future where innovation is distributed, where solutions emerge wherever problems exist, not just where funding is concentrated. And that future is closer than it appears. Because once communities see technology as something they can shape, not just consume, the dynamic changes permanently. People stop waiting for upgrades and start building alternatives. They stop assuming the best solutions will arrive from elsewhere.